Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
And before we begin the business of the day, I understand that we have Senator Allen and Senator Golden Campbell to join us by video link. Those in favor? Thank you very much. Welcome, Senators. Just to observe that a number of our members are ill, and we wish them a speedy recovery. I don't anticipate that we'll be too late today. I noticed that Senator Crawford is clearly planning to leave from here and go straight to Montego Bay. I never asked whether you were a patron or a performer, but it seems to me that based on your outfit, you could fit in the either category. Oh, dear. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: Ministry Paper number 47 of 2022 and Annual Report of the Financial Services Commission for the year 2020-2021. Green Paper number 2 of 2020 entitled Jamaica's Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management Policy Strategy 2020 to 2040. Annual Report of the National Solid Waste Management Authority. The Rio Cobre Irrigation Area Order 2022 and its resolution under the Irrigation Act. The Mid-Clarendon Irrigation Area Order 2022 and its resolution under the Irrigation Act. The Road Traffic License Duties Order 2022 and its resolution under the Road Traffic Act. The Custom Tariff Revision Amendment number 2 Order 2020-22 under the Customs Act. The Electricity Net Billing Regulations 2022 and resolution under the Electricity Act. The Economic and Social Survey, Jamaica 2021. Report of the Regulations Committee of the Honourable Senate on its deliberations on the National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits, Special Selection, Windcrest Hills Housing Development Order 2022, and the report of the Regulations Committee of the Honourable Senate on its deliberation on the National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits Special Selection, Twickenham Glades Housing Development Order 2022.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. To the Honourable Senate, I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 19th day of July 2022, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Transport Authority Act was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Marisa Delrimpe Philibert, CD, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2020-22, read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions. I'm sorry, Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Mr.
Notices of motions given orally. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, I beg to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate. 1, the National Housing Trust Housing Benefit Special Selection, Twickenham Glades Housing Development, and 2, the National Housing Trust Housing Benefit Special Selection, Windcrest Hills Housing Development under the National Housing Trust Act.
Thank you, Senator Minister Campbell. Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Mr. President, may I ask you to revisit the matter of the notices of motions?
Surely. The question is that the item notices of motions given orally be recommitted. Those in favour? Go ahead, please, Minister.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate on the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection Twickenham Glades Housing Development under the National Housing Trust Act, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 22nd day of July 2002, be approved, and be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate on the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection Windcrest Hills Housing Development under the National Housing Trust Act, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 22nd day of July 2022, be approved. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at the later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Thank you very much, Minister. Public business.
Mr. President, thank you. Just to indicate that it is intended today to first proceed with the notices, or rather of the motions, of which Senator Campbell has just given notice, that is the 2 irrigation orders, as well as to proceed with a resolution to adopt the report of the Regulations Committee addressing the 2 NHT orders as well. We will then proceed to deal with the Road Traffic Amendment Act and the opening of the debate on the road traffic regulations. So with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor to Senator Campbell.
Thank you. Senator Campbell.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. Whereas by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Irrigation Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may by order, subject to affirmative resolution, declare any area specified in the order to be an irrigation area. And whereas on the 11th day of July 2022, the Minister made the Rio Cobre Irrigation Order, Order 2022, and whereas it is desirable that the Rio Cobre Irrigation Order 2022 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Rio Cobre Irrigation Area Order 2022 resolution, and 2, the Rio Cobre Irrigation Area Order 2022, which was laid on the table of the Senate on July 2022, is hereby affirmed. And whereas by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Irrigation Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may by order, subject to affirmative resolution, declare any area specified in the order to be an irrigation area. And whereas on the 11th day of July 2022, the Minister made the Mid-Clarendon Irrigation Order 2022, and whereas it is desirable that the Mid-Clarendon Irrigation Order 2022 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Mid-Clarendon Irrigation Area Order 2022 resolution, and 2, the Mid-Clarendon Irrigation Area Order 2022, which was laid on the table of the Senate on July 22nd, 2022, is hereby affirmed. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Public business.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister to take the motions, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
That the orders, having been tabled and having been certified by members of both sides, I now ask that the orders be approved, Mr. President. Unless
Senator Morris.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to add our support for the orders, and Senator Fraser-Binns will speak to the NHT regs. But, Mr. President, I have to endorse and support the irrigation orders that are before us, especially in light of the concerns that we are having with food security in a rapidly changing global environment brought about by climate change. And if we are talking about sustainable living and sustainable livelihood, certainly we have to make sure that our farmers who number over 250,000 individuals have access to irrigation water, and based on my understanding, these orders are designed to enhance that in the areas mentioned in Clarendon and along the Rio Cobre basin in St. Catherine. But, you know, Mr. President, it would be remiss of me not to mention a concern that I have, which has been expressed by individuals in the society, and especially in Portmore, St. Catherine, where, you know, there are lands that have been designated for agriculture, for farming, are now being used for development or allocated for developmental purposes, and farmers have been dislocated as a consequence. And that has serious implications for our food security and agricultural production, because I take note that in the presentation from the minister, in his presentation, he said that the aim of these irrigation orders is to realize a 15% increase, Senator Crawford, in agricultural output. So if it is that you want an increase in agricultural output, yes, we do support and endorse the provision of irrigation, but at the same time, we have to make sure that lands that are designated for agricultural production is not taken away from farmers and given to developers to do other things and jeopardize the sustainable livelihood of these farmers. So we do support the orders with the reservation that I have here and mentioned on behalf of the farmers. But we understand and realize that agriculture, for it to be sustainable, for it to be viable, and for us to have increased production, we have to have a consistent source of irrigable water for our farmers, and that is what these orders seek to do, and we do support these measures. May it please you, Mr. President.
Minister. Sorry. Yeah.
Mr. President, I hear my friend bemoaning the fact that there's likely to be some
both the NHT and the irrigation orders together, and we wanted to find out if, you know, we were more to respond both to both issues. That's the NHT and the irrigation orders. Are you treating it separately?
I'd hope to treat them separately, but given the nature of the orders, it may very well suit us to take them together. In those circumstances, Mr. President, may I just recommend that our friend Senator Fraser Binns address the issue of the national housing trust.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Sorry, Senator Binns. Minister, in respect to, can we deal with them separately for good order? Complete the irrigation, and then you move on to the other matter. All right, thank you.
Very well. My friend had mentioned that there was some risk of the lands being transferred or used by developers, and I don't think it's appropriate for an issue like that to arise in these circumstances, because in fact agricultural lands, as I understand them, before they can be used, several applications will have to be made for change of use, and those lands will have to be approved for housing development by the Land Utilization Commission. They would have to be the nature, if it is agriculture, an application would have to be made to the Land Utilization Commission for it to be used for any other purpose. So given that there is a request, in fact the area to be covered for irrigation is being expanded, it is unlikely that then there would be the NIC would turn against itself and then reduce the area to it. So I just want to allay fears that there's no likelihood that the land, which is now being considered for expansion for purposes of irrigation, would be reduced. Against that background, and in the absence of any objection to those orders, I'd ask that they be approved.
The question is that the motion the question is that the motion be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Yeah. There are two motions.
Yes, we now move to dealing with the issue of...
The approval is in respect of both.
For the orders.
The orders.
In the irrigation orders.
Yes, there are two.
Yes.
And it is for both that
for
you
both.
have... Yes.
For both.
I'm just making it
yes.
abundantly clear.
Yes. Mr. President, we now move to deal with the reports, from the Regulations Committee, the two special housing development orders. That's in relation to the National Housing Trust and the Twickenham and Glades Housing Development and the Windcrest Hills Housing Development. Those are subject to regulations, and the outcome of the reports which were tabled earlier today, in the circumstances and those regulations were signed off by both sides. I don't think there is a challenge, but I believe my friend may very well have some comments.
And you would have moved for the suspension of standing orders to deal with this?
We saw the...
Okay. But I just want to get it clear, because when I got up here, you spoke to the irrigation.
Yes,
so
we had made the application for the suspension of the standing order.
To deal with the NHD.
Yes, we so did.
I'd ask you, Minister, I'd ask you to repeat.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate on the National Housing...
Minister, at public business, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable...
Very well, sir. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that I'm sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable this. Senator to take the motions, notice of which was given earlier, and that specifically relates to those dealing with the National Housing Trust regulations for Twickenham Glades housing development, as well as the Windcrest Hills housing development. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I don't think that the motion will require much debate, given that the committee met only yesterday, and the outcome of those deliberations were tabled today. In fact, I think there's an agreement on both sides that we'd accept the outcome of those deliberations, and it may very well be that we can have. I'll invite my friend, Senator Fraser-Binns, to make her comments, if she does want to do so.
Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. And indeed, Mr. President, Minister Campbell is quite correct that there is agreement on both sides in relation to these two motions dealing with the NHT special order for Windcrest and Twickenham Glades. Mr. President, these are orders that from time to time comes to the Regulation Committee, where the NHT is empowered to make special provisions for certain government, public servants, you know, the nurses, the police, the security forces, etc. And this matter came to us, and we explored and gave our, consent for such to be undertaken. The only thing I want to add, Minister Campbell, is that notwithstanding our full agreement, that Senator Allen, in her contribution yesterday, made a point which I think is of note for all of us, and it has to do with the expansion of the categories that the NHT now provides this, perhaps shall I say, preferential allocation for, which is embedded in law, I should add, Mr. President. And I believe there was an agreement, Senator Campbell, that the power does exist, and perhaps what needs to be done is greater consultation with other stakeholders, such as our firemen, so that they know that this service exists, and, this provision exists, and they could perhaps lobby for some kind of special consideration in that regard. And the reason for that is that Senator Gale sits on the board, so he understands that what the NHD does is, in every development that they have, whether it's for units or lots, that these groups will have a certain allocated numbers that are given to them. And the trust, speaks with these specific groups and encourage their members to apply. And this is in addition to the general application that is open to John Public, as we call it. And so the members felt that perhaps the good could continue to other select groups, such as our firemen. And it is something that I believe the trust would consider through its board. But that being said, Mr. President, we do stand in support, and we agree with Minister Campbell that deliberations went well and the opposition has no challenge. Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, I do, in the circumstances, ask that the reports, that the two reports regarding the foregoing be approved by this Honourable Senate.
Members, you have heard the question. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Obliged, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and I express appreciation to Minister Campbell for having taken these matters so effectively and efficiently, and thank the opposition, of course, for having ensured that the matters could proceed in an efficient manner, given the consensus on their contents. Mr. President, it's now intended to address the issues which I think many people await action by the state. And those are the matters of the road traffic legislation, the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2022, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022, and the road traffic regulations, the long-awaited road traffic regulations. 1 second. Thank you. As indicated before, Mr. President, it's intended to take the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, which seeks to make minor amendments to the Road Traffic Act 2018 in order to ensure more accurate implementation of the road traffic regulations. As members may recall, the Road Traffic Act received the Governor General's assent in December 2018. And consequent on passage into law, the technical team in the ministry, while carrying out a further review of the regulations, identified a few phrases that needed amendment as are presented here today. The bill that is before us makes amendment to 9 sections and 1 schedule. And I just wish to signal that there will be 2 or 3 other small amendments to be moved from the floor, and I will address those in the presentation. The amendments, however, quite simply are as follows. There is the expansion of the language used to define a motorcycle to include, and I quote, any other vehicle so constructed to be steered by handlebars with the driver sitting astride the vehicle with an unladen weight not exceeding 400 kilograms. Other minor amendments set out in the bill to substitute words with more accurate ones or ones which are reflected in the regulations. For example, in section 13, subsection 1A3, the words registration certificate are being deleted and replaced with the words license certificate for consistency. In section 25, subsection 2A, by deleting the word of and substituting the words not exceeding, which allows for a range to be contemplated in terms of the language. In section 55, subsection 2B, by deleting the word of as it appears a second time and substituting the word or. In section 71, by deleting the words lights and substituting the words lamps. Section 95, subsection 4, by deleting the words under this section and substituting the words under section 13 or 94, as the case may be. In section 97, subsection 3, by deleting the words road signs and substituting the words traffic signs. In section 110.1.1, by deleting the word cylindrical and substituting therefore the word cylinder. And in the 5th schedule, paragraph 5.5, by deleting the words a specimen of breath and substituting the words a specimen of blood. And this is, of course, in respect of testing blood alcohol levels. There are circumstances where the testing has to go beyond a breathalyzer, and that is, of course, when the person is in hospital as a result of the incident or accident that gave rise to the testing in the first place. Regarding the further amendments, Mr. President, one is in relation to a reference to the word ticket instead of notice, which is the language that's used in the amendment and in the regulations. I'm going to come back to that when I have the exact language that has been put forward. The other is to reinsert in clause 115 or in section 115 of the Principal Act the responsibility of the owner of a vehicle to keep their contact information updated. Members may recall that we had actually discussed this when the Act came forward for consideration. And it was an offense to have incorrect information. And the Senate had been of a mind, with some reticence on the part of the technical team, that this should remain as an offense, and if not as an offense, it should remain as a duty. And the entire reference to the responsibility to update your information was taken out. However, it has been recognized on the review that it should be the responsibility of a car owner to ensure that the appropriate information, that correct information is there for them to be contacted. Because if we are having an issue with tickets reaching people, it certainly could never be thought that we would go through these extensive amendments, even as we seek to implement a new electronic ticketing system and allow people to say quite simply that they never received their ticket because their information was was not updated, and that there's no duty for them to so do under the law. So the intention is today to amend the bill before us by inserting an obligation on the owner of a vehicle to ensure that their contact information remains updated. It will not be made an offense, but the duty will be there to ensure that car owners know, motorbike owners know, that your responsibility is to keep that information accurate. So we want to avoid loopholes after this mammoth effort, Mr. President. I will come back with the exact amendments as soon as the ministry provides them so that we can take them in committee. Mr. President, it is my intention to open the debate on the road traffic regulations as well at the same time before we go to committee, and that will give the technical team the time to send the amendments that they had intended to. And it really does give me a great sense of satisfaction to open. I would have preferred that we were also going to close, but I realize the circumstances of the day. But tremendous work has gone into the repealing and replacing of Jamaica's road traffic regulatory framework established in 1938 with a modern framework. And I know we all share the view that it has taken too long. I said it 2 weeks ago when we scheduled the regulations, and indeed I have said it before that as well. In fact, I'm quite sure that all of us have at some stage over the past 4 years. We understand, however, that it is important to undertake the technical work in an extremely detailed way because the matters are so technical and because the changes are so substantive. But I am 100% certain when I say, Mr. President, that the majority of Jamaicans are impatient for not only the act to come into effect through its amendments and through the regulations, but they are impatient for its enforcement. I believe strongly, Mr. President, that for every indisciplined driver or motorcycle rider on the road, for everyone breaking red lights, speeding through stop signs, everyone endangering children's lives, speeding and driving recklessly, Mr. President, I believe for every one of them, there are far more Jamaicans who are waiting for the tools to be given to the state to ensure that there is strong enforcement and prohibition and prevention of this indiscipline on our roads. Mr. President, sorry. Yeah.
Regulations now? Because we were saying that it would be much tidier if we could just close out the amendment, because we don't have any major problems with the amendments as proposed, and we'll just close it out and then you go into the...
It's not a difficulty, Senator. I was actually just taking the time to await the technical team's amendments. So, but we can suspend for 5 minutes and go through. That's not a difficulty. Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to separate the bill from the regulation.
They would be separated, but I mean, the debate is somewhat holistic. They all work together, so, and I think they were treated similarly elsewhere. But I don't have a difficulty, Senator, and if you would just allow me to check where the amendments are, then it's not a difficulty. President, if you, I didn't want to have to formally suspend the debate because they have advised that they're emailing the matter as we speak. So I could just read the amendments and then we could proceed with the opposition's response and close out the bill. I don't have a difficulty with that at all. Thank you.
And Senator Morris, having heard that comment, you will go along with that?
I would say to you, proceed as you were, and then in order to facilitate the efficient operation of the Senate, and then we do the closing out of the bill. But you will have to suspend the debate on the regulations, because that is where we have to make the separations based on how we proceed in terms of the standing orders.
But I think that was the intent. The regulations, the debate on the regulations was not going to be closed today. All right? Yeah. Yeah. Microphone, Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. And what I will do then is I'm going to revert, as was originally requested by Senator Morris, to revert to the bill, because the technical persons have now sent the proposed amendments, which can allow us to take the bill through its stages and then proceed to the debate to continue the debate on the regulations. Having embarked upon it, just for good order, I will say that I am suspending the debate on the regulations and reverting, having embarked on it, just to ensure that there's no confusion at the end of the day. And going back to the bill itself, on which I've not closed the debate, or close my opening, I can just indicate that there will be a new clause 9A, which will be inserted after 9, to simply say subsection 16B of section 105 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting the word ticket and substituting therefore the word notice. This is because the word notice is what's used for tickets in the regulations, so it is for good order. So 105.16b. There will also be a new clause 10A, so that after clause 10, there will be inserted in the amendment bill before us a new clause 10A, which states section 115 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting next after subsection 4 the following as subsection 5. For the purposes of the delivery of notices under this Act, every owner and driver of a motor vehicle has a duty to provide to the authority updated contact information whenever such information changes. So this is the reference to which I made, or rather the amendment to which I made reference earlier, given the importance of ensuring that the tickets get where they are supposed to get, now that we're entering a new paradigm of enforcement. So those are the two additional amendments that are not in the bill before us. And given their clarity and simplicity, it is with that, Mr. President, that I close the debate and ask for the support of members in respect of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022.
Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. The opposition finds basically no fault with what has been proposed to give greater clarity to the bill. The last statement, however, subsection 10B, sounds as it has already been corrected with the needs, being that they have that obligation to the needs. So I'm not sure if it is necessary to continue with an obligation also to the authority if that obligation was already under the national ID. So that's just the only thing that I heard, and I wonder if it is necessary to continue. But the changes has added clarity, and we are fine with those changes.
Thank you very much, Senator Crawford. And just to indicate that were the NIDs mandatory, then it would solve the issue. But because you can't presume, based on the actions of others, it is not so. And accordingly, we can't presume that every driver's license holder will have a NIDS, certainly not in the initial stage anyway. So it's important for us to ensure the duty is consistent across the board. So with that, Mr. President, I would ask for second reading of the bill to take the matter to committee. Thank you.
It just came to my mind that a car owner could live in the mountains. And could live in the mountains and not want to get involved in the NIDS. The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Road Traffic Act 2018, read a second time.
The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause.
Mr. President, I understand from the opposition that they are so clear that they have no difficulty with us taking the clauses en bloc, so we could, so that we could move with some alacrity, apart from the ones which you usually take separately.
All right, having regard to the comments made earlier and the consent of the opposition, Senator Morris, that we'll take the clauses in block, and that would have us go clauses 1 to 11. Those in favor? No, there are no amendments in this. I will put them. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. And we have some amendments that were proposed, and they have been read into the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will reread them for the purposes of the record.
Thank you.
The new clause 9A to insert next after clause 9 the following as clause 9A. The marginal note reads amendment of section 105 of Principal Act, and clause 9A itself reads subsection 16B of section 105 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting the word ticket and substituting therefore the word notice. The next amendment of for which we seek approval, Mr. President, is a new clause 10A, wherein it is stated, insert next after clause 10, the following as clause 10A. The marginal note reads, amendment of section 115 of Principal Act, and the clause reads, 10A. Section 115 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting next after subsection 4, the following as subsection 5. For the purposes of the delivery of notices under this Act, every owner and driver of a motor vehicle has a duty to provide to the authority updated contact information whenever such information changes.
And so we have two amendments as have been stated by and read out by the Minister in detail. Those in favor? Those against? And I put the clause as amended. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Where's it? I do report. Sorry, the question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 2 amendments. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I ask for third reading.
Well, I think it is my turn at this stage, Minister. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 2 amendments. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The bill can be read a third time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Road Traffic Act 2018, read a third time and passed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I now ask to reopen the debate on the Road Traffic Regulations 2018. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just put in my phone in the Google window, car crashes in Jamaica. 2 rushed to hospital after dramatic crash on Constant Spring Road. Men killed in St. James crash identified. Speeding blamed for fatal St. James crash. 2 men killed in car crash. Body of an American man cut in half in car crash. Father mourns death of 2 children, car crash, Mr. President. And I could go on. And I know we extend condolences to the father of the 2 children who died in the accident in Old Harbor just earlier this week. 11 people were involved in that accident, Mr. President, 2 cars. 4 of them were children. One of those youngsters who passed had just celebrated her 6th birthday, 2 days after her 6th birthday, and killed due to speeding. Due to speeding. Mr. President, again, I say that to say that the regulations before us are important. Bringing the new Road Traffic Act is important, and its enforcement will be important as well. So that the act can come into effect, and that a reset button can be pressed in respect of restoring discipline and order on our roads. Not only will lives be saved, Mr. President, but I believe strongly that we can cascade the effects of discipline on our roads into general law and order in our society. Mr. President, this modern framework before us is intended to keep pace with rapidly evolving technology and increasing population growth and density. And in fact, similar undertakings to modernize road traffic regulations and legislation is being undertaken across the world. Mr. President, mobility is an essential part of our lives. We move from homes, we engage the road system to get to work, to school, to the shop, to supermarket, bank, restaurant, whether it's the party, visit friends. The road network is a part of our lives. Access to safe mobility and sustainable mobility impacts on several other indicators of development, including access to employment and education, growth of the economy, farm roads. It's all important to us. Mr. President, in 2021 alone, 484 lives were lost on Jamaican roadways. Globally, there are almost 1.3 million deaths and an estimated 50 million injuries yearly. The sheer scale and impact of these events have now been recognized as a constraint on development and on sustainable development, and have therefore become a focus of attention within the UN system, leading to a unanimous declaration of the second decade of action for road safety, as well as a global plan for the decade of action for road safety, 2021 to 2030. I am proud that Jamaica has been participating in these discussions, and pleased that we are on a path of positioning road transport as a key driver of sustainable development, recognizing that our citizens, vehicles, and the road infrastructure must engage in a way, must interact in a way that ensures safety. The government is therefore working to ensure safe and resilient roads across Jamaica, including the relocation of roads to allow for better alignment and to make them more resilient for climate change. And members would be aware that the government is facilitating investment in the range of $600 million to $800 million on the North Coast road infrastructure. For the Southern Coast Highway Improvement Infrastructure, the SG, Mr. President, $17.7 billion has been allocated. And in addition, some $8 billion has been allocated for a special public investment in infrastructure program to install drains, waste, water, and sewage infrastructure, as well as the widening and dualization of major thoroughfares. Mr. President, $1.2 billion has also been allocated for the Montego Bay bypass and $3.7 billion to the repair of secondary roads across Jamaica. This allocation in particular will also be used for the construction of sidewalks and other related road upgrading to ensure the safety of all road users, not just drivers, but pedestrians as well. And every single road user will benefit from what is the largest program allocation to physical infrastructure tabled by any government of Jamaica in budget in history. Mr. President, vehicle safety is also a priority for the government. Vehicles must be designed and fitted with the appropriate protective devices to ensure the safety of those those inside and those outside of them. So the government is also putting in measures to ensure safe road use, behaviors that contribute to road injury and death, including speeding, driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, non-use of helmet. These are all behaviors that must be deterred and in certain cases punished as well, where it is that they affect the safety of others. Enforcement, therefore, Mr. President, as I have sought to emphasize, will be crucial. The further integration of technology will allow for better enforcement and should allow for greater public understanding and support, as well as assisting with monitoring. Mr. President, this Honourable Chamber, this House, will recall that the long-awaited regulations, which were tabled on Tuesday, February 1, 2022, were withdrawn and replaced on June 7, with further changes based on ongoing review. And Mr. President, we are still reviewing. So we really invite, although we won't be amending these regulations, they are substantively ready for implementation of the relevant sections that are required for operationalization of the Act. But there is the intent, because of, again, the scale of the repeal and replacement that is underway and our leap forward to a modern framework, that we are ensuring that we have a keen eye on what is before us. Mr. President, the Road Traffic Act received the Governor General's assent on the 31st of December 2018. Certain matters in the RTA 2018 are subject to affirmative resolution, including in accordance with Section 110(4) of the RTA, regulations related to driver's license tests, those which provide for custodial sentences. Those require affirmative resolution, and they are part of these regulations. In accordance with Section 128 of RTA 2018 as well, all monetary penalties under the Act and any schedule to the Act, Mr. President, they require affirmative resolution. So there are things in here which don't require affirmative resolution, and they can be changed by order thereafter. but these require affirmative resolution, and therefore that's why it's so critical for us to approve them as soon as possible for operationalization. But I'd like, in my opening, Mr. President, as we get ready for the full debate, to highlight some of the substantive areas in which there are differences from the legislation now in force and the processes with which we're more familiar, so that persons can pay attention, particular attention to those when they are reviewing. So I'll just describe the regulations, pardon me. There are 299 regulations in all, grouped into 13 parts. And in addition, there are 13 schedules which provide the details and forms necessary for implementation of the Act. Part 1 introduces the regulations, citing them as the Road Traffic Regulations 2022. They highlight and define key terms used for easy interpretation of the document and reinforce the obligation of every owner and driver to comply with the regulations. And I want to remind members that some definitions are in the Act, so they're not repeated in the regulations because the regulations are read with the Act. And this is why we have indeed amended the Act today so that they fit together more seamlessly. Mr. President, Part 2 deals with the requirements for a motor vehicle to be operated on a road, including obtaining a certificate of fitness, registering a motor vehicle, and obtaining a certificate of title and licensing, whether yearly or half-yearly. With the advent of changing technology, requirements for registration of electronic motor vehicles and hybrid motor vehicles are also provided for. And we will recall that there is an active pursuit of increasing the number of e-vehicles that are imported into Jamaica with the recent reduction of the duty from 30%, import duties from 30% to 10%, and indeed the waiver of license fees for 5 years in respect of electric vehicles. So there is a holistic approach to the matters before us. So this Part 2, Mr. President, just to remind, is fitness, registration, and licensing of motor vehicles. I know a lot of people are interested in that, so I'm repeating it for your ease of reference for the listening public. Under the new provisions, registration and licensing are separate processes, with registration allowing for the entry of the motor vehicle into the National Vehicle Register, whether it will be licensed for use or not. So I want to remind members that when the Act was passed, it created a new National Vehicle Register where every vehicle in Jamaica will be registered. And whether it is active or it is not, it will be in the register. Every vehicle in Jamaica should be accounted for. That's a new approach to understanding what is in our road ecosystem, Mr. President. With the changes to the structure of the National Vehicle Register, the authority will be able to keep more comprehensive records of the vehicles, and those no longer in operations will be declared as dead, retired, inactive, or exported. But their presence on our road network will have been recorded. Mr. President, the authority may by notice require an owner, to present any vehicle, including public passenger vehicles or commercial vehicles, for examination for fitness certification. And the steps to be taken if a vehicle being operated on a road is found to be defective are also set out in the regulations. Furthermore, provisions concerning the creation, use, and replacement of the respective documents and registration plates are included. So new rules governing demonstration plates are provided for and will allow for better monitoring of their use, and they will include the payment of an annual fee by motor vehicle dealers. So again, just making notes, the new framework for demonstration plates, and there will be an annual fee payable by motor vehicle dealers, which will allow for better monitoring of their use, not the fee, but the new system, of course. Mr. President, Part 3 deals with the construction and equipment of motor vehicles. It outlines that the construction and the special features that are required for vehicles to be certified as fit to operate on the road. Most of these requirements are consistent with those that exist now, with certain parameters updated to be consistent with the features of vehicles now being manufactured as opposed to when they were first established. So maximum dimensions, length, width, height, as well as overhang limits, maximum wheelbase for different types of motor vehicles, etc., are also set out. Requirements and general maintenance provisions for the construction of the steering mechanism of motor vehicles and motorcycles, along with brakes and braking systems, are described. So there are new provisions for tire safety and visibility through transparent material. They're also required, including environmental standards for noise and emissions of vehicles. And I know these are two things that concern the public generally. The noise of some vehicles, especially the motorbikes, those are being addressed. It's absolutely critical. And then the emissions is part of air quality management and the climate management. What's that? Yes. Well, those are issues that have to be addressed as well, indeed. So silence as well as the noise. I hear you. It is a complex world. We live in a complex world, Senator Morris. So, well, Mr. President, there will be special requirements for public passenger vehicles, and these are outlined as well, because they have to undergo a special inspection to be deemed suitable for public transportation. And this is critical. We have got to get a handle on how our traveling public that depend on the owners of public transportation vehicles to provide them with safe vehicles to travel to work and go about their daily business. And the current system is not sufficiently robust. We need to address it, Mr. President, and these regulations seek to so do. The visibility of vehicles is reinforced through provisions for reflectors and reflective material on large vehicles and for various lamps, including direction indicators on vehicles. I just want to highlight some of the specific new or modified provisions. One is the need for rear and side underrun protection devices for large trucks and trailers. One is a requirement to comply with motor vehicle exhaust emission standards, Mr. President, and I just spoke to that. So this smelly gray smoke that envelops you when you're driving behind the wrong truck, Mr. President, those should become of the past. Descriptions of the different types of lamps and how they are required or permitted to be installed and used. And to note that motor vehicles of model year 2024 or later should be operated with daytime running lamps. So 2023 vehicles are already in the system, but 2024 dealers should have time to ensure that what they are importing into the country fit with these regulations, and they must include daytime running lamps. Mr. President, the circumstances under which revolving lamps, light bars, and spot lamps may be used, because these are, of course, restricted, guidance on the use of hazard lights, and restrictions on the use of colored lights and warning devices. These are all provided for, Mr. President. And the grant of special permits consistent with the current practice will allow for vehicles that do not meet the requirements of the regulations to be operated on the road subject to any conditions that are set out in the special permit. Mr. President, Part 4 deals with the licensing of drivers. It provides details with respect to not only licensing, but the steps in various application processes, the required documentation, the forms to be used, as well as the fees to be paid. The details concerning renewal, suspension, revocation, and other related matters are also described in these regulations, and many of the processes remain as they currently exist. So in respect of learner drivers, Mr. President, an applicant will now be required to produce a medical certificate, while the requirement to pass the road code test before being granted a learner's permit has already been implemented, and it has been in operation since January 2020. I want to just reinforce for the listening public that there is no fee to sit the test. I don't know if people hear the public service announcement, but sometimes unscrupulous people insert charges where there are no charges. Learner drivers, anybody telling you there's a fee to sit the test is not telling you what is. There's no fee to sit the test. There is, however, a fee to get the license if you have passed the test. And that is certainly provided for, how you pay for that at the tax office, etc. that is within implementation. Mr. President, motorcyclists driving with a learner's permit will need to be accompanied by an instructor. Yes, but that's exactly it. That's exactly it. If you shouldn't have to pay if you don't get through. That's the point. You shouldn't have to pay if you don't get through because you have to go again. And we want to encourage people to follow the system, right? So, but the motorcycles, Mr. President, the motorcyclists driving with a learner permit need to be accompanied by an instructor who is driving another motorcycle within 6 meters of the learner driver. So, but you can't have the, he can't be your pillion. You can't tow him and he can't sit beside you. We certainly can't sit beside you. He will observe, Mr. President, he will observe you. So he can't be further than 6 meters of the learner, and this is to ensure that you don't have them at large. And at large, Mr. President, as you know that some of them are. I take this opportunity to remind of the changes in the driver's license structure that we have been through, because it's been some time since we passed the Act. Remember that RTA 2018 classifies motorcycle licenses as Class A. And then there's a Class B, which includes motor trucks and motor cars, not for commercial use. So no longer is it that you require a general if you're going to drive a van, not for commercial use. There's a private B class now, and then Class C is for the operation of commercial motor vehicles. So some changes are made to the requirements to be met for the issuing of licenses, consistent with the new classifications, such as the theory and practical tests needed to satisfy the authority of the competence of the applicant to safely operate a vehicle. And specific requirements for Class C commercial driver's licenses are described, as well as the steps to be taken by the holder of a foreign driver's license. So of course, we encourage, because of the responsibility of owners now, in respect of all of these matters, we really need to ensure that companies with fleets, that persons who deploy taxis, that they pay attention to all of these things now, because the system is changing and they will ultimately be held responsible in many circumstances. The treatment of an application for a person who is hearing impaired, Mr. President, this is also provided for, including how the test should be administered, and the requisite notation on the driver's license, if granted, are set out in this part. So again, this is part of the inclusive approach of the new framework, which addresses persons with special needs or with different needs. Mr. President, it addresses what should happen if a holder of a driver's license becomes afflicted with a disease or a disability that is likely to cause the driving of him by a motor vehicle, him or her, of course, such as he or she is licensed to drive, to be a source of danger to the public. And the focus there is on the source of danger and not on the disability per se. And the procedure that should be followed if his condition has changed for the better. And I know when this was actually debated in the Act, and Senator Morris had significant interventions on this point, the issue about not the change in one direction, but if a condition improved, that should also be recognized and permitted for a change of status. Mr. President, a medical certificate completed by a registered medical practitioner will now be required for the renewal of a driver's license for any person who is 70 years or older, and these licenses will be valid for a period of 3 years. Now, I know I've been hearing discussions in the public domain on those saying that the 3 years is too long, and there are those who argue that it is too short, that it's inconvenient. But the truth is it's a balance between the bureaucracy and the health considerations. And the fact is that many insurance companies, so you need a license, but you also need insurance, require that to be renewed every year. And they require medical certification every year. So if you don't get that certification, then you should not be driving. So the fact that your license would be valid for 3 years would actually have been constrained by your inability to obtain insurance. So, Mr. President, however, if you have, you wouldn't have the additional burden of having to reapply, and the cost as well, of course. So, Mr. President, provisions are included for demerit points on a driver's license to expire after 15 months, provided that less than 10 points are earned during such a period. So if you have 10 points, your demerit points are not going to expire to allow that to regenerate. However, after a period of suspension, so if you have reached the point of demerit point, the number of demerit points that require you to be suspended, after your license has been suspended and that period has expired, the points which gave rise to your suspension will be expunged. But the fact of your suspension will be noted in the National Register. So your record will be endorsed to say that you have had a license suspended, which will, of course, affect you in respect of your insurance, because they will know that you are not a safe driver. So while the points are expunged to allow you to have a clean slate once more in that regard, it certainly will not erase the fact of a suspension. Mr. President, the authority is also empowered to require specific training or retesting for persons whose driver's licenses have been suspended, and this was a matter of significant debate at that earlier stage too, Mr. President. Every learner's permit and driver's license is to be recorded in the driver's license register, and the required information is prescribed. So the information to be set out in the driver's offenses register is also set out. Mr. President, Part 5 addresses certification of driving instructors and licensing of driving schools as a new activity to be undertaken by the Island Traffic Authority. So all of the provisions in this part are new, setting out what is required for permission to be granted to provide such services. A register of those so certified or licensed is also to be kept by the authority. So driving instructors who are paid for their services will have to be certified by the authority, and similarly driving schools are to be duly licensed. Because it cannot be that you have a totally unregulated system that is teaching people how to drive unsafely. I hope you will repeat that exact phrase when you are contributing to the debate, Senator Sinclair. It is a self-perpetuating cycle if you are having persons who are not qualified to teach, teaching people poor practices to navigate the roads. Mr. President, exceptions will be made for certain circumstances under which certification is not required, and specifically, that would be certainly a driving instructor certificate won't apply if a family member is teaching you to drive. That's not a commercial arrangement, and certainly you will still have to take your test, etc. But you have to recognize that there are some informal circumstances which exist. The prerequisites for a person who wishes to be certified as a driving instructor will require that person to be at least 24 hours of age, to have at least 24 months licensed driving experience. I find that bar a little low personally, and successful completion of a driving instructor training program, more importantly, approved by the authority. Other considerations include character references, criminal record check, and any other security vetting or medical fitness that is required. The authority has the discretion to certify an applicant or not, and based on the information presented. And in the case of a refusal, the authority should advise the applicant of same in writing with a reason, and notify the applicant of his or her right under Section 44 of the Act to appeal to the tribunal. The certificate is to be valid for 5 years, but it may be revoked for up to 5 years because it may be suspended or revoked under certain circumstances which are outlined. Mr. President, just to again state that a driving school will require a certified driving instructor as an owner, director, or partner. It will require adequately equipped buildings to be used for classrooms and an instructional program that meets or exceeds the standards established by the ITA. So driving instructors and driving schools will be required to operate within the stated guidelines and to keep records as set out in the regulations. Other requirements will include, of course, insurance and the operation of safe vehicles, and a certificate of completion is to be issued to students which under certain circumstances may qualify the application for exemption from aspects of testing by the ITA. Part 6 deals with traffic signs, speed limits, and rules of the road, Mr. President. I know you are very interested in this particular section. Several additional provisions have been included to bring our legislation closer in line with the 1968 Convention on Road Traffic. Imagine, we are coming into alignment with the 1968 Convention on Road Traffic. The use of traffic control devices, as well as other restrictions on the use of the road to direct the actions and behavior of drivers, Mr. President, are addressed. The different types and classes of traffic control devices, how they should be used, etc., these are outlined with details of traffic signs set out in the 10th schedule, and provisions address damage or obstruction of traffic signs, whether deliberately or accidentally. And you remember that the Act now provides for the state to claim back against you where you crash and mash up infrastructure and signs, etc. The state will be able to claim back against you. No longer should taxpayers bear the responsibility for irresponsible driving, Mr. President. Mr. President, rules related to pedestrian crossings also included with the mechanism for establishing and removing crossings, because these are not, they're not just at large for anybody to decide that a crossing should be in a particular place. There are things that have standards, have regulations, and reasons behind them, technical reasons behind them. So the rules are, however, to be simplified to allow current practice to be brought in where communities do seek to support such infrastructure. And the addition of an 11th schedule has been inserted to detail locations, Mr. President. General rules about driving that previously had only been included in the road code are now embedded in the regulations, such as driving on the left, right-of-way rules at intersections, signals to be given when turning or slowing down, overtaking or other maneuvers, behaviors at railway crossings, or prohibitions on parking. These are now in the regulations, Mr. President, not just in a road code that you may or may not have bought or seen. Indeed, they are now in the regulations. Mr. President, safe operation of motorcycles and pedal cycles is being targeted through specific provisions governing their use on roads with the requisite protective gear. In addition to prescribed helmet, motorcyclists will be required to wear a high visibility vest. And importantly, the community of persons living with disabilities will be happy to know that the issue of wheelchair use is being addressed in respect of sidewalks, pavements, and verges. Mr. President, I just want to note that in Rwanda, the motorcyclists wear a vest that has a number on it, and the helmet has a number on it, so that they not only do authorities manage them by virtue of trying to see the small license plate on your motorbike, because they operate motorcycle taxis. And in such circumstances, there is a number which is highly visible. It matches the number on the helmet, and there is no variation. So it's a very well-managed system and allows for a significant level of discipline in terms of how the cyclists operate on the road. Mr. President, in addition to current speed limits, including those for toll roads, provision is now made for school safety zones. And I know this is something well welcomed by parents. There will be school safety zones where the speed limit will be 30 kilometers per hour, as well as areas with a 65 kilometer speed limit. And implementation of these new speed limit provisions will be phased. Field work is underway, Mr. President, to identify, update, and finalize boundaries that are in the 12th schedule, and the 12th schedule will be expanded. But it does not require to come back to us here in the Senate, Mr. President, because it's one of those schedules that doesn't require affirmative resolution. Equipment is prescribed for the measuring of breath, for the measuring of speed, and for the investigation and reconstruction of motor vehicle collisions. Mr. President, Part 7 deals with electronic monitoring and surveillance. While electronic monitoring and surveillance is not yet in effect, the new regulations will allow for the remote detection of offenses using cameras and other electronic devices, and the issuing of tickets for such offenses by electronic means. Where traffic offenses are detected remotely, the owner of the vehicle will receive the ticket. So it won't be a function of if the tint is too dark and you can't see who is driving the vehicle, etc. Once you own the vehicle and your ownership is established through the National Vehicle Registry, you will be held responsible for the offense as it occurs elsewhere in the world. So electronic detection devices will be approved by the authority to be installed on or near a road. Some of these devices are listed in the regulations along with the types of offenses that may be detected, including speeding, disobeying, traffic signals, and operating not being licensed, insured, or certified as fit. And as the program is rolled out, the regulations will be adjusted to cover any additional devices or provisions that are necessary. And I just want to say what an important part of this new framework, electronic monitoring, is, because it removes that human element that not only has the discretion for error, for corruption, it removes it to ensure that there is an efficiency in the system, because it just requires the camera to pick up the license plate in the course of an offense to generate the ticket. And it will be by virtue of the register and the duty that we have confirmed of the person to confirm their current information that we will be able to ticket them. So instead of having these long lists of unserved tickets that come to traffic court with the clerk explaining to the judge that the police still can't find this man or this man with the 1,000 tickets, it will be that the ticket will be generated, it will apply to the car itself, without which they will be unable to renew their license, renew their certification, their registration, or their insurance, so that there will be a consequence. And this matter of running up 1,000 tickets and avoiding the law should, Mr. President, with this new framework, be a matter of the past. So we welcome it. Mr. President, Part 8 deals with use of motor vehicles. So it deals with the regulations of motor vehicles in operations. Restrictions on how they may be used on the road will include noise standards. We spoke about those earlier. And the levels for noise standards are set out in the 8th schedule. Matters related to the piloting and towing of vehicles, manner in which persons, goods, or loads are to be carried, and the requirements for warning of protrusions beyond the vehicle. So I think that might be, all of us would have at some point driven behind the truck with the planks with a little red piece of cloth tied on it, etc. So we anticipate a little closer management of such such activities, proclivities. What's that? But we will have to make sure that everyone knows, Mr. Senator Morris. They are absolutely relevant because they affect other users. So certain vehicles, large trucks in particular, where they become stationary on a roadway, will also be required to display the prescribed emergency warnings. You cannot just stand up on a roadway, block up traffic there's no warning, no nothing, no indication to other users of the road that there is trouble ahead. You have responsibilities as a user of the road. Mr. President, weighing of the vehicles will remain pretty much as it is. That is an area that had been amended a little more recently than 1938, I might say. No significant changes to be made for these regulations, but limits for the laden weight of vehicles, permitted distribution of weight on tires, and the mechanisms by which vehicles may be weighed are all contained in Part 9, but not significantly changed from the Act before these amendments. Part 10 deals with protective devices, Mr. President. Whether imported or manufactured in Jamaica, they are required to conform to specifications and approved standards as set out in the 13th schedule. And installation of these devices must be done in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So the Bureau of Standards is identified as the agency that tests and certifies protective devices. And I just want to highlight that every motorcycle being sold or purchased under these regs will be required to include a helmet. So when a motorcycle is sold, a helmet must be sold with it. That is And additionally, vehicles of model year 2024 or after April 2024, in addition to the lighting requirements which I mentioned earlier, must be fitted with an airbag. You should. For hygiene, if nothing else. Mr. President, I use this opportunity to once again remind motorists and motorcyclists of their personal responsibility to ensure that they and their passengers are equipped with the necessary protective devices. So seat belts have to be worn by all passengers and drivers in the front and back of vehicles, and motorcyclists must ensure that they and their passengers wear a helmet every time they go on a motorcycle. Mr. President, emergency vehicles are addressed under Part 11. So again, we're reminded about the rules related to right of passage of an emergency vehicle on the roadway and how other road users are to respond. You are to pull over when an ambulance is coming. There is someone who needs emergency help behind. There might be, the police may be in search of a dangerous criminal or be getting someone from an accident to a hospital. It is critical that you respond appropriately as a road user. Emergency vehicles are permitted to use lights and warning devices while executing their various functions, and drivers and pedestrians are to take action to allow the vehicles to pass. I want to also highlight, and we have all seen it, tailgating an emergency vehicle is illegal. You are not, because you see the ambulance cutting through traffic, unless it is you are a relative of the victim heading to the very same place. And even then, I don't know if this will hold you, because I don't know that there's an exemption. You're right. The only person who have to reach the hospital is the sick person. But just to say that the permissible distance between an emergency vehicle and another vehicle is actually 50 meters. You are not to hitch up yourself behind the vehicle to get through traffic. It is not right. Wait your turn. You will get there in due course. Mr. President, Part 12 deals with the transportation of dangerous goods. It's another new section, another entirely new section, and it incorporates the provisions of the United Nations recommendations on the transportation of dangerous goods. It prohibits the transport of dangerous goods unless in compliance with this Part 12. So anyone transporting dangerous substances must be suitably trained, must be qualified, but exempt quantities are provided for in the first schedule. So an individual can drive to get fuel for a lawnmower, cooking gas, etc. Those are dangerous fuels, but you can, the regulations are not unreasonable. But persons doing so in large quantities, in commercial quantities, part of a business, must be qualified and trained in order to deal with same. So the duties of the owner, the duties of the driver, and the duties of the consignor and consignee are all outlined in this Part 12. Mr. President, Part 13 deals with general provisions regarding the discharge of liability for offenses set out in the 5th schedule, and whether by payment of the fixed penalty or as directed by a court. And the provision is made for Form EC, which is the evidence by certificate of the person driving or using a motor vehicle when an offense involves such a vehicle, and of course, to whom by the person to whom the vehicle belongs. The part further repeals the Road Traffic Regulations 1938 and other relevant regulations, and it does provide for savings and transitional provisions. So this is an important part, Mr. President, Part 13, dealing with payment for offenses that are set out in the 5th schedule. Mr. President, I'll just very quickly run through some of the schedules which exist, because we now get to the schedules to the regulations. They provide for detailed information related to various matters, forms, specifications, technical requirements, as well as offenses and penalties. And they're arranged as follows. The first schedule deals with the transportation of dangerous goods, as I referred to above. The second schedule deals with visibility requirements for commercial motor vehicles, lights, marking, reflectors. Mr. President, the third schedule deals with forms, fees, and driver's license requirements. Forms, fees, and driver's license requirements in the third section They deal with the content of the forms, lists of fees for services, and the requirements for the various classes of driver's license. These are new, so just for the listening public who wants to understand about driver's license requirements, they're in the 3rd schedule. 4th schedule deals with the specifications for registration plates. It describes the plate colors, the numbers, letter arrangements. The 5th schedule deals with offenses and penalties. Part A sets out the offenses under the Act. Very important that people familiarize themselves with these. And the maximum penalty for the matters that are heard before the court, while Part B sets out the fixed penalty that may be paid at the tax office. And if I remind members that the Act provides that if you get the ticket and you pay it before 30 days, then you're okay in respect of the actual, you don't have to go to court. You don't have to go to court. And if you, I believe you don't get demerit points either. If it's an electronically detected offense and you pay the fine, you don't get demerit points. So it's another incentive to just pay before. If not, then of course a court proceeding can be implemented, and this is where all the fees stack up, which you will have to discharge before you can renew your license, your registration, or your insurance. Mr. President, so that's the 5th schedule, an important schedule. 6th schedule deals with braking performance. 7th schedule, protection on vehicles, that is mud guards, splash guards, protection devices. 8th schedule deals with environmental standards, so emission and noise. 9th schedule deals with maximum axle loads, and this is in table form. The 10th schedule deals with traffic signs, graphic and written description of road signs, road markings, traffic signals, their meaning and the actions to be taken. 11th schedule deals with pedestrian crossings, one-way roads, bus lanes. Part A deals with the one-way streets, Part B the bus lanes, and Part C, Mr. President, Part C is the bus lanes, Part B is the one-way streets, and pedestrian crossings is Part A. 12th schedule deals with speed limits. Part A sets out the maximum speeds for different classes of vehicles. Part B will include the speed limit areas for all parishes, the 50 kilometers, 65 kilometers limitation for all parishes, and Part C will contain the speed limits for toll roads. Part D will contain the details about school safety zones. The 13th schedule, Mr. President, and we're getting close to the end now. Restraint system specifications and standards. So these set out the restraint systems and protective devices that must be in the vehicles or the form of the certificate of exemption. So, Mr. President, as I wrap, road traffic in Jamaica has steadily grown over the years with increased demands for mobility and economic activity. I am confident, however, that in approving these regulations, we take a crucial step in working towards the safe and effective use of our roads. The regulations before us are crucial for establishing and maintaining order and discipline, for reducing road crashes and fatalities, as well as advancing our economy and indeed our sustainable development. So I now submit, Mr. President, the Road Traffic Regulations 2022 for the consideration and approval of this Honourable Senate. May it please you, Mr. President. And, Mr. President, I leave it to the opposition to indicate whether they will respond today at all or whether we will proceed with the entirety of the debate next week.
We have indicated that there are a number of our senators who are out, and we would want to respond next week.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The presentation.
Mr. President, just to indicate then that it is not intended to do any further business today, so I would ask for suspension of the debate on the Road Traffic Regulations 2022.
Thank you very much. The question is that the debate on the road traffic regulations 2022 be suspended for a date to be fixed. Those in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Mr. President.
Mr. President, so I ask for Senate to be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Thank you. I think that Senator Safar
You're getting it right, Mr. President.
as a brief intervention.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on a motion for adjournment to raise an issue of national importance, and that is the recognition of July as being Healthcare Workers Appreciation Month, and particularly that with respect to the COVID pandemic and the efforts of my colleagues in the healthcare sector. Mr. President, I think that it goes without saying that it has been trying times and that our healthcare workers have risen to the bar that was set so high, not just here in Jamaica but globally, but particularly here where many of our healthcare workers oftentimes carry water in baskets, as I say oftentimes. They especially had to do so under very unpredictable and strenuous conditions, and they have saved many lives. Notwithstanding that, we have lost colleagues within the healthcare worker group. Too many to relate personally, because each and every one brings a certain sentiment that is heartfelt. And there is grief and loss amongst us, as there is general in the society. And for those families, we say thank you for having allowed their family members to give of themselves in such ways. Mr. President, the pandemic continues, and the work of our healthcare workers is continuing. We have significant challenges still, but I know that there are persons who are pushing through. And we encourage and enable as best we can the population to give the support and the necessary show of appreciation that our colleagues so very well deserve. A number of activities are being planned, including church services, family fun days, award banquets, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness is actually launching a competition for the creation of a monument in the honor of healthcare workers who died as a result of COVID-19. And so on behalf of the Senate, and especially this government side, we say thank you to our healthcare workers, and we go steadfast with you in your cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Longmore. Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President, and please permit me...
Congratulations on your recent elevation.
Thank you.
If it is to be contemplated as such. No, I never meant it to be snarky.
That's fine, Mr. President.
No,
thank you. I appreciate it.
I meant it because no doubt it is going to bring with it work and responsibility. That's how I meant it.
Of course. Please permit me to speak from a seat that is not my own.
On the side of the government. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Let me just add or use this opportunity to add my own bout of commendations to our healthcare workers. I was pleased to see the minister announce that we would use this month, July, to celebrate and to acknowledge the work that they have done, because I think we can all agree that they have come under significant pressure. They have been faced with significant challenges, but like Senator Longmore said, they have truly risen to the occasion, and they have put a lot of work into ensuring that the citizens of this country are well taken care of. But I also want to put forward that as we seek to vet our healthcare workers, as we seek to have the various ceremonies and activities geared towards encouraging their work, that we also ensure that we enable them and make their work just a little bit easier by ensuring that the necessary structures, I should say, are in place to ensure that they can work and work to their full capacity. We know the challenges that our healthcare system faces, and COVID has really shown us or illuminated some of those challenges even more. And so as we move forward, we know that there are other threats on the horizon that we must take into consideration. And so I want to encourage or use this opportunity in the space to caution us and encourage us to make sure that we equip our health system so that it can function to the full capacity. We want to ensure that our healthcare workers have the resources that they need to continue to do the good work that they do despite the challenges. As I take my seat, Mr. President, I want to say that we see that many of our healthcare workers have been forced to migrate, and I say forced because many of them highlight that the challenges are just far too much to bear. And so as we seek to recover stronger, as we seek to move forward, we must ensure that they're properly taken care of, not just by offering medals or by putting in place monuments, but that they have the compensation that is truly befitting of their work. If you'd permit me, Mr. President, I think it would be also remiss of me not to acknowledge those who have given their lives, those who have lost their lives during the pandemic. And I think it would be most fitting if we could use this opportunity just to have a moment of silence for those workers who have truly given of themselves in the service of this country.
Thank you very much, Senator. Are you finished?
No, Mr. President. There's one more thing that I want to say.
I will do the moment of silence when you have completed.
Awesome. But, Mr. President, before I take my seat, we must acknowledge also our sportsmen and women. All right, so I preempted you. All right, but even before we go there, I think that it is important that we give that congratulations to our sportsmen and women who have truly done a tremendous job. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President.
As a mark of respect to the members of the medical fraternity, medical profession, I am getting there. Medical profession, medical fraternity, and those who work in the health system at all levels. In fact, I am advised to use the phrase health care workers, and those who work in healthcare facilities who lost their lives really attempting to keep all of us safe. I would ask the Senate to rise and observe a motion and a moment of silence in honor of them and in recognition of their service and the service that they have given to the country, and of course their families who have lost persons during this traumatic time. And light perpetual shine upon them. Minister, I think you wanted to say something. Thank you.
Indeed, Mr. President, thank you very much for that. And of course, a bit of a somber moment to precede. What I would want to propose is just a thought for something which is significantly less so. And that is the cause for the great jubilation and celebration that our athletes have produced over this World Championships thus far. I must tell you, it was extremely difficult to prepare for Senate this morning, waiting for the 200 last night. And even after, just keeping up with the interviews and hearing the responses of our athletes and everyone across Jamaica and indeed across the world celebrating with them. Our athletes bring us such pride and joy, Mr. President. I just wanted to ensure that this sitting did not end on the cusp of such a historic, or rather in the wake of such a historic performance as we have seen last night in particular. We know that Minister Grange has already spoken in the lower house, and indeed the lower house has paid tribute to the performance of the athletes in general. But the performances of Sharika Jackson, World Championship fastest woman alive, 21.45, and Shelley Ann Fraser-Price, indeed must just continue to bring us great joy. I keep watching the video over and over again, plus the 100. We, of course, send our encouragement to Elaine Thompson-Herro. She has brought us infinite pride as well. She had a tough race last night and clearly is experiencing some disappointment. But we say we send her all the love and express every faith that she will come back with a strong return. So we send her our encouragement as well, Mr. President. So I again express our appreciation and congratulations to every member of the Jamaican team that is representing us in Oregon, because the fact is, to get there is a feat in and of itself. To get through the heats and into the semis is another feat. To get from the semis into the final is another feat. So we can't only celebrate those who get the medals, Mr. President. There are those who have worked extremely hard over the years to get where they are now. Grit and discipline it takes. Sometimes we only think of the glory, but it takes a lot out of them, personally and otherwise. So this Senate, I know, wants to express their love and appreciation for each and every one of them, male and female, Mr. President. And with that, unless there are others who wish to add words, I would ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
You had really sort of preempted me, because I had hoped that at the completion of the exploits in Oregon, perhaps next week, we could take a more elaborate tribute, because I know that a number of the members wish to say something. So perhaps next week we could do this. Unless you wanted to just say something.
No problem, Mr. President. We are willing to delay until we have even more stars after the rest. And we do have the hurdles as well, so we will delay, but we join. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you very much. Minister, there is a motion. That? Okay, thank you. There is a motion on the floor that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Before I put it, I'm going to ask members to remember that there is a joint sitting of the Parliament on the 5th day of August at 3:30 to mark the 60th anniversary of the nation and the parliamentary proceedings. And I think we may also have a special guest. We will also have a very special guest. I'm making the announcement now, Senator Crawford, because I know that many persons are in the process of planning their Independence weekend. So do not forget, Senator Crawford. You see, you never even hear me. A special sitting of the Parliament at 3:30 on the 5th of August. It's a Friday. No, whether there's a meeting next week Friday is another issue. But it's the 5th of August, and just by way of information, there's also a special sitting on that day at 9:30 of the Court of Appeal to mark the birth of the Court of Appeal. So it's an important occasion for the country generally. So please, when you are planning, do not forget, joint sitting 5th of August, 3:30. Beg your pardon? It's 2:30. Okay, so it's okay, 2:30, joint sitting. No, well, you get here at 2:30 for a joint sitting at 3. And Court of Appeal special sitting at 9:30 in the morning. I just mentioned that. I know a number of you would not normally be in attendance, but I do mention it. Please keep safe on the weekend, those of you who are traveling out of town. And let us remember that independence is coming up and it has certain obligations that we need to fulfill. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against?